the Clinton Foundation as part of our youth entrepreneurship program. And we typically host an in-person conference every year, but obviously with COVID, we've been all virtual. So we're planning for all of our programs to be virtual through at least next fall, just because we do work with a global population, many who have not just been able to have access to the vaccine yet. So that's, I think, a whole nother also probably conversation within this, just with access and making sure our programs are equitable across the board. But it sounds like a really interesting conference. Is it open to everyone or just, who, like, typically who are the attendees?
From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nina, is so it's entrepreneurship centers. So centers that are delivering on entrepreneurship programming. And I do know that they have like a membership. So they have a membership and they have like an annual conference for a few days. And I'm not sure if membership is required. I know that currently we are offering the network membership as well. So it could be a member-based thing, but I'm not sure if it's required.
Welcome to everyone who's joining in right now. I see Julie here, Brandon, Bonnie, Brett, Erica. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. We'll get started in another minute as more people join in, but it's great to see everyone here so far. Oh, one note is that when you send your chat, make sure to send to everybody, because otherwise the chat will often just send to the panelists. All right, as people start streaming in, I'll welcome you guys to Diversifying Your Pipeline of Student Participants today. So this webinar is brought to you by Startup Tree, the all-in-one holistic solution to manage and grow your entrepreneurial program. You can visit us at www.startuptree.co. And so on the agenda today, a recording of this webinar will be available to everybody who's registered for the event, and you can feel free to forward it to anyone who wasn't able to make it. In this hour, we'll be spending the first 45 to 50 minutes with a moderated discussion and end off with Q&A from the audience. Please feel free to send questions and comments in the chat throughout the entire webinar. This is meant to be a resource for you, so please learn from our panelists as well as from each other. And we'll have an audience poll in the beginning to kick it off. My name is Hulda, and I'll be your moderator for today's panel. Pam from Startup Tree will also be in the chat and helping out monitoring behind the scenes. So today we have attendees from all over the region, from different industries and entrepreneurship, from higher education to small business development centers to foundations, economic development, whole gambit. The one big topic that we're here to talk about today is how to make sure that the resources that we have at our centers, no matter what size or stage, how to make sure that those are accessible to and welcome to all populations. Innovation is what really happens when people from different backgrounds come together, but it can be more difficult, or at least perceived to be more difficult, for certain people to just get started. So for today's discussion, I'm joined here by thought leaders from some of the top entrepreneurship centers and organizations to talk about how their programs go about increasing and diversifying their applicant pool with students from different backgrounds, how they provide resources and support to make sure that they not only get their foot in the door, but have a good shot at success when they're there, how to recognize and close those gaps in opportunity, and ultimately, at the end of the day, expand the reach of their program's impact. So finally, I would love to introduce today's panelists. We have Carly, Diana, Nina, and Megan. So first off, Carly Chase is an entrepreneur in residence at MIT's Martin Trust Center, as well as a senior lecturer at MIT Sloan School of Management. She's also the director of MIT Delta V Accelerator, and previously founded, launched, and served as the managing director of MIT NYC Startup. Diyanna Torres is the director of Blackstone Charitable Foundation. She has over 10 years of experience in higher education, nonprofit, and the public sector. Previously, she was a New Leaders Council Institute Fellow, as well as the Director of Economic Opportunities and Business Partnership at Jobs First NYC. Nina Ho is an entrepreneur, creative director, and educator. She's been recognized in publications such as Business Insider, Austin Monthly, and Austin Woman for her work. Currently, she works in higher education with a focus on promoting equity and access to entrepreneurship education as the director of the LaunchPad at UT Austin. And last but not least, Megan Strother is the Senior Community Engagement Manager at Clinton Global Initiative University. With 10 years of experience at the intersection of nonprofit and education, Megan joined after graduating with an MS in social entrepreneurship from the University of Southern California. Thank you everybody so much for joining us for today's discussion. And before we dive into that, I would like to start off by asking the audience to answer one question in our poll. What are you most interested in hearing about today? Feel free to type anything else that you're interested in that isn't covered here into the chat. As we're filling up, I see a lot of heavy answering toward, this is a multiple choice question, but a lot of participants are asking about how to best support underrepresented groups. All right, so good thing is we are covering all of these topics for today. So we will be touching on a little bit of each of these, but it's good to hear the interest in the audience. All right, so just to start off, Diana, I'd love to hear a little bit about, so from your experience, you have experience here from both a bird's eye view from being Blackstone, being director at Blackstone, working with economic development in New York City, as well as working firsthand with students on campus and multiple campuses, as well as being a student yourself. I feel that barriers of entry nowadays aren't often restrictive in technicality anymore. It's more of a psychological or systemic issue. So could you give us some insight into the systemic or psychological barriers that teams often miss when they, or don't know how to overcome when they're trying to encourage participation from students that are minorities when it comes to entrepreneurship?
Thank you, Hulda. Pleasure to be here with everyone. I am Dayanna Torres. As you mentioned, this is a very personal and important conversation and topic. As a first generation graduate and growing up as a woman of color, Latina from the Bronx, I've experienced firsthand being systemically excluded from economic opportunities, but also leveraging and accessing resources to help me navigate those systems and pretty much be able to tap into education, training programs, and access networks to help navigate and access opportunity. I've worked firsthand with college students as an academic advisor for first generation college students with the TRIO program. Also had the opportunity to launch a student success program within CUNY, working one-on-one to understand the barriers and experiences that students are facing from all ages, trying to achieve higher education. So when thinking about students' competing priorities while assessing extracurricular programs or co-curricular programs and pretty much navigating how to successfully complete their semester, making sure that we're keeping in mind that oftentimes students from non-traditional backgrounds may often be caregivers, head of households, really, juggling multiple jobs. Myself, I was a work study student. I had 3 jobs on campus, super involved in different student activities, and really having an understanding that in the conversation about entrepreneurship, if you haven't decided yet that you're majoring in business or engineering or, the more traditional programs that are often correlated to business, you often don't find yourself or imagine yourself in it. So representation very much matters, and the language and the message that we use to connect students to opportunities is very important to demystify and use language that is more inclusive. For example, creating the message that, entrepreneurial mindset is an opportunity to develop job skills and training for the future before students leave campus. So it's really important that we also see representation within teams that are promoting programs. If you don't have a diversified staff, identifying perhaps student champions or academic leaders or other staff members across campus that can help you promote to students, partnering with student groups, partnering with Greek life students in fraternities and sororities, and really having the opportunity to go into the classrooms as well, meet people where they are in order to bring them onto your programs.
If I can add on to what Dayanna said, I really love her perspective of taking students' schedules into mind, and that's something so simple that we can all do that we might take for granted. So if you're a student working full-time job, you might stack your schoolwork on Tuesdays, Thursdays, so you can work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? Or if you're an student athlete, we're never going to see you at certain, during certain months or seasons. If you're working or if you're living off campus, you cannot commute easily. Can you do a hybrid event where you're streaming so students don't have to take public transportation to get back on campus? So making events and opportunities like that accessible from a scheduling lens, it's a really easy first step towards inclusion in your programs.
I love what both of you mentioned about, especially meeting students where they are. How important do you think that representation, especially in your staff or in your center's marketing and stuff like that, how important do you think that role plays?
I think it's extremely important. I would say it's something you have to be incredibly thoughtful about, and also really honest with your team about, right? A lot of us, I can speak for us, we have very small resources. We're a very small team. We're never going to be able to, I don't think, perfectly represent sort of the incredibly diverse student body at MIT, right? We have students from all over the world. We have students, from all different backgrounds, all different ages. And so I think that number one, being self-aware about that is first and foremost. And I think second, to be able to compensate for that. Dayanna was alluding to this, but really making sure that you're creating relationships across campus with students, with alumni, with other parts of the university, so that it's not just on you to market, right? You have other partners who can be your advocates, who can be your champions, who can get into those like nooks and crannies of the university ecosystem where we try to get to know our customers, our students as best as possible at MIT, but we ultimately miss things because students are fluid. Every year is a new sort of like ecosystem that they develop for themselves. So, making sure that we have current students who we can ask, can you go present this to your, to your frat? Can you go present this to your sports team or to your student club? We'll never be able to get into every single sort of area that students are in, and we're aware of that. So really creating trusted relationships with every student on campus, that's not feasible either, but with a really diverse group is a way that we get around that when we are really self-aware about what we lack.
And I will add to that with our program, and I am not based at a university. I work, at a nonprofit that's supporting youth entrepreneurship and students, on college campuses across the world. And so, we consider kind of our students, our alumni, those who've participated in our program, and we've relied really heavily on our alumni for a lot of some of the things that, to Carly's point, there is a self-awareness of what our team is and is not able to provide, whether it's representation or just managerial capacity. And we have champions within our network that we really work hard to invest in and support, who are passionate about supporting kind of the next generation of students that come in, are able to show students, you can be in my, walk in these footsteps. I'm just a few years ahead of you. The feedback we constantly get from our student participants is how valuable our alumni community is, and having them to look up to. So I think, how we invest in our alumni is very much a part of this conversation.
I think just to put a point on what Megan's saying, right? Like, I think the question was about sort of your staff representing you in your marketing. That should not be the way you market, right? You really should be relying on your alumni, other examples. We certainly, we provide services for students. So my face is certain places on campus, but that should not be the majority of what students see. It should really be, their peers 1 or 2 years away, of real inspiration for them, so that they really can see it and believe it, that they can be that too.
Yeah. Another great opportunity is interns, right? Where we're at UT Austin, our LaunchPad, we're also a 5-person staff team, but we have about 7 to 10 undergraduate interns every semester. And those are the students doing classroom shout outs. Those are the ones bringing people onto like Startup Tree, right? And really fostering the community. And, like Carly said, to moving forward, all of our program recruitment assets and videos, it's all student faces, it's student testimonies. The next big program we're about to recruit called Entre Mindset Bootcamp. It's a 3-minute video with just students talking about their experiences. So very much minimizing, maybe staff presence and really highlighting the students in our program.
I would add to what has been said, and I remember the saying that says, I may forget what you have said, but I will never forget how you made me feel. Keeping that in mind when setting an atmosphere that is central, that is welcoming, that the faces are friendly. And many times when a student stumbles upon your program, especially if they're not in an entrepreneurship or business track, they might be seeking a supportive network, someone that they can confide with, connect with, be honest with in terms of what ideas they might have, what problems they would love to solve, and how to integrate entrepreneurship into their perhaps their major, or if they're a creative, etc. So creating an environment that people feel welcome, and keeping that in mind with marketing and communications, not to create additional barriers when creating requirements for programs. So making sure that the language is simple, that it's less jargony, and that it really shares that it's open for all students at different levels, and that there's opportunities for everyone to leverage the resources that you offer.
And yeah, and I want to add to that, because I think something we have been working to address is that entrepreneurship, just the thought of it and the idea of it is actually very intimidating. And most people do not identify themselves as entrepreneurs. So to Diana's point, framing it as the entrepreneurial mindset, and we try to simplify it even more. Like, we're just looking for someone or a team who cares about a problem and they have an idea of how to address it. You are welcome into our program, and we will support you in that ideation, that implementation. So we really do see ourselves as a launchpad of sorts for kind of this next gen of social kind of leaders. And I think another point, just in terms of how we make the recruitment accessible, is our staff. We work really hard to make ourselves accessible to students who are interested in applying to the program, and to the schools we partner with who want to support the students on their campus. So we very frequently host office hours that anyone can sign up for. We also weekly host information sessions that are interactive that students can sign up for, so that they can learn more about our programs, interact with our staff directly. We really, we want to put a face to kind of our program, just because it does make it more personal and accessible and not so daunting. And we've really seen success by making our staff available to student applicants and interested universities across the board. So I think that's also really important.
I agree. I think that what do you all think are some of the most common blind spots in outreach and recruitment of applicants that other centers often miss? So I can tell all of you are very self-aware of the parts of your centers and the moving parts that aren't being met necessarily with expectations, but how are you actively able to reach a diverse population of students, whether that be from gender, year, school, or income level? Carly, if you'd love to kick it off for us.
Yeah, sure. So, I think, like, to flip that question, how do you know that you're doing well in that? I think the first thing to think about is how you're going to measure that. And so for us, we think of our programs and our events and everything that we do as sort of a funnel. So we have a lot of things, right? Like inspirational at the top, just come in the door, come celebrate with us, especially the first 2 weeks of school. We've got lots of events and ways to make us accessible. We had like a block party last night with a dog petting area, right? Just like really fun, just to everybody's point, just because lowering the barrier to entering the entrepreneurship world is a really important thing on a campus, right? If you're trying to create this inclusive and diverse environment. So we've developed a system, for instance, called Orbit, which is sort of a digital footprint for us, where we can track who's engaging with us. So not only are they coming to our events, are they going to take our classes, are they going to engage in our programs? And so when we get down to our more selected programs like the Accelerator program, we want to look at those applications and see how we're doing. And so if we're not thrilled with the diversity of the candidates that we're seeing from all angles that you mentioned, Hulda, it's certainly not one or two measurements. There's so many different ways that we want to be diverse at a campus like MIT. We can go back and look sort of like, where did people drop off, right? And we have a I'd say a problem with females every single year. And, it takes really talking to your customers, right? Your students to really get to understand sort of, okay, you participated in a 3-week program in January, but you're not going to participate in a full-time program after graduation, right? It's a really different thing, and really understanding how we can make people feel like they can take that leap, or like they do want to sort of commit to the types of programs that we run is an ongoing challenge for us. So I think measurement's key. And then when you are promoting those programs and you're trying to get the word out, I think that, number one, attitude is just so important. This is not like a CYA environment. This isn't like a check the box environment. Like you've really gotta make sure that you're being super thoughtful, super scrappy, right? This isn't about like sending an email blast or getting something on a calendar. That just does not fly in a university environment where there's so much, so many people who are trying to vie for students' attention. So for us, it's really about just being as scrappy as possible, which includes building those relationships with students to get us in places where we can't alone as staff, making sure that, we sit on the business school side. We spend a lot of time just hustling over and, flyering the engineering school, figuring out how to pitch in classes, I've pitched on a basketball court before to the MIT basketball team, really making sure that you're being really scrappy. And that's, the best part about being part of an entrepreneurship center and teaching entrepreneurship is like, we really practice what we preach, right? In the same way we ask them to be really thoughtful about their customer acquisition channels and their marketing strategies. I mean, we've really got to do that too. And the challenge of a university is, again, the ecosystem's always changing, right? You have new students every year, you have new things that are popping up, new trends. So it's not something that you can sort of rely on the old standard year after year. You really do have to take the time to be thoughtful, every time that you engage students in a marketing capacity, I think, at a university.
If I can add on to that, I really love the analogy that Carly shared in terms of what is the customer journey, right, in our students. And so in addition to measurement, another thing that we do is segmentation, right? So we view students on this broad student entrepreneur journey where we segment it into, explore, ideate, create, and scale, and make sure that that's how we think about providing programming that addresses all of them. And I think that simple language is really helpful for students to self-identify and understand what they need or want from us, right? And so our mission now is really moving further upstream and serving those broader student populations where, hey, I don't have an idea I'm working on yet, but I'm broadly interested in curious entrepreneurship. What do I do next, right? And so I think that's one process that we've used at UT Austin that has been really helpful for us.
Just to add on to that, just as another sort of data point for folks, we do something similar. We have personas for our students. Again, just like we ask our students to create personas for their customers, we do that. So, and that really gets to sort of the inclusivity for, entrepreneurship can be for you, whether you're ready to start a company or whether you spend 90% of your time in a lab and you just want to come learn how to be more entrepreneurial, right, in your mindset, in your skill set. And so again, having that journey perspective, I think, as opposed to sort of like a one-time transaction, whether it's for a class or for an event, that really helps us call specific journeys for specific students and then have the right ways to measure it, right? Not everybody's going to end up in our accelerator. That's not the right place for every student on campus. And we would never want to push everybody that way.
Yeah, I would add to what everyone said that another really important aspect of knowing if we're doing well is always asking, how are we doing? How did you benefit for students and for partners across campus? And also lifting the stories. Oftentimes students don't feel as confident to share how the programming, for example, if they're participating, and oftentimes with our Blackstone LaunchPad network, if our students don't have the opportunity to be invited to share their story, they may not often share how impactful it was for them. But it's something that I'm very fascinated by is that the directors of the LaunchPad network serve as mentors and empower their students to really take advantage of opportunities and resources and to really own the evolution of their experiences while participating in the LaunchPad, and open doors for others. So being able to hear more from the student experience of how they were able to land an internship or their first time job with the pitching, perhaps they learned how to pitch their business and they also learned how to pitch themselves, and how also they were motivated and inspired to continue to persist through graduation because of their involvement on the LaunchPad and the support that they received by participating. So really listening and asking the question, and also empowering and lifting the stories that are very diverse, and people take different angles to how they leverage these kinds of resources.
And I will add, I am in total agreement with everything that's been said. I think diligently tracking the student, we refer to students who we have really one primary application. So we kind of talk about our prospective students, and we really do everything we can to track what information sessions are they attending, how far did they get into the application before they stopped? How can we support them based on what they've done so far and what resources they've accessed so far? And I think to Nina's point, segmenting, we also segment our students by ideation, implementation, and scale, which has been really helpful in providing them with more customized support and how they can really build out their ideas and their projects. And I think to Dayanna's point, we are also really intentional about creating feedback loops. With our stakeholders, not just the students we're supporting, but with other groups we work with, our alumni, our university partners. Just this past summer, because this has really been top of mind for our program, we organized a recruitment advisory committee that met over the course of 6 weeks. We had 3 video calls with this particular committee that was comprised of different thought leaders within our university partnerships, as well as the alumni in our program who've been really actively involved, typically serving as mentors. And they were able to help us, they reviewed our application materials, the resources we're providing to students during the application process. And it was so helpful because you don't know what you don't know. And they were really able to provide us with different perspectives and these blind spots. We talked about that. We're just not on our radar because it's very dangerous to make assumptions. And so we are really, trying to be proactive and not doing that, and really listening to the leaders within our ecosystem to help us in being more supportive to the students who could really benefit from our program.
Going off that, Megan, I'm actually curious. So in your experience, this is actually directed at all of you, but we keep talking about how important it is to have to segment into these different personas and then, provide resources to them that are useful at each stage of the pipeline. How have you seen the quality of ventures change and ebb and flow based on the diversification of your applicant pools to begin with?
It's been very helpful. It is something newer for our program, and I am not on, I don't run our year-long programs. I kind of help get students in the door, and then my colleagues manage the actual, we call it our curriculum and our mentorship, that content. However, it's been so helpful in our application, which I see, I help lead the development of our app, and we really see our application is building the foundation for the student success when participating in our program. So we want to make sure that our app is really thoughtful. So in our app is where we segment in terms of, we have a lot of different questions we ask, but by segmenting the students by those 3 different phases in terms of what their ventures are, even if it's just an inkling of an idea, we're really able to provide the students with the support they need to further build out their projects. Just because if you are pairing students with someone who is writing some sort of entrepreneurial idea down on paper for the first time, and then we're pairing them with another student who, has been working on their social venture for years, and they have built out a team and they have a CEO. It's just not reasonable to think that that student will really be able to glean as much as they possibly could from the program. So we're trying to be more intentional about who we match students with, whether it's with their peers or also with their mentors. So I definitely say that has been really helpful for us, and just providing almost like a tailored, structured social impact curriculum for each of those students.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. I'm going to take a few questions from the chat. So Mike Hill asked, do you have thoughts on how to connect with underserved communities beyond the student candidate or entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I would love to share an example from another unit partner on campus called the IC Squared Institute. They have this program they run that they're actually trying to scale across the US called March Economic Madness. And what they do is they get teams of maybe 5 students, and they embed diversity into the team profiles where there has to be, it can't be all grad or all undergrad, it has to be a mix, it has to different like schools, and basically they pair them with a remote or small rural community. They go in, essentially do customer discovery, interview stakeholders, host town halls, and find out what are some challenges, whether it's access to internet, or there's a dam nearby, and how can we generate more job opportunities. And we found that to be a really interesting way to introduce student problem solvers into these communities, and they get money and they can choose, and sometimes those communities will actually choose to implement some of those challenges. And so the word entrepreneurial is not included in that challenge, it's more like entrepreneurial, but I think that's a really great example of how you can engage underserved communities.
I would add to that as well. I think it's really important to partner the same way we partner across the campus with faculty, staff, student life, etc. It's really key to understand that those closest to the problem are closer to the solution. And unless they feel represented and included, they may not often be able to leverage the resources and opportunities to really address the systemic issues that are often separating them from, tapping into entrepreneurial programs and resources. So it's really important to partner with organizations or people that already have perhaps either the trust in the community. Trust is really key, and who the message is coming from. So if you're promoting a program, it may be best to partner with someone that can share the information for you versus it coming from you if you don't have a certain relationship or connection, but very much diversifying how you reach different people, meeting them where they are. Oftentimes there are programs and cohorts, like for example, like first generation college students often have different programs on campus that they have a trusted mentor or counselors, or they have orientation and cohorts in which they are building a community. So partnering with those people that have that relationship already to share your program could be very effective versus kind of sharing a flyer or a message that might not resonate with them because it might not come from someone that they already trust. So really important to keep partnership in mind and representation for sure.
And I'll just add a quick comment. This is kind of just going back to like data analytics. When we look at our app, I think Dayanna brought up, oftentimes entrepreneurial programs are based in business schools, but we're actually seeing in our applications that some of the top, academic fields or studies that our students are coming from, those who want to problem solve and address, pressing challenges are coming from medical schools, engineering schools, political science. So I think there's also we don't need to just be targeting business students, because I think a lot of people who want to change the world don't identify as being part of business centers or business leaders. We actually, how can we be more intentional about making sure our programs are intersectional? Because I think that is what's so beautiful about entrepreneurship, is that it is intersectional, and how are we purposeful in bringing together these different groups of people who can represent, all perspectives, all skill sets to address complex issues. So I know, with our program during our recruitment, we really try to reach out to different departments and not just rely heavily on certain centers where we sometimes just assume that's where students who are interested in entrepreneurship will be located.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that Brandon in the chat is saying how we're specifically trying to keep LaunchPad as not being a business school specific, and it's a constant battle on its own. I completely hear you. I think that does anyone else have any comments to make on that topic?
Yeah, we face that all the time. We are technically affiliated our center with the business school, which doesn't really help. And we love our business school students. It's not that we don't, but we really know that, right, diverse teams in terms of experience and skill sets, they're going to make stronger ventures anyways. So it is absolutely our job to make sure that we're getting across campus. So again, just that whole sort of how do you attract students is a huge topic that, we're constantly rethinking and trying to be more thoughtful about. So we go to extreme lengths with our School of Engineering. Undergrads are a different community than graduate students. I would say to some extent, they have even more sort of in front of them and more, they have sports, they have all these other things that do take their time. So for us, it's actually a strategy we've really been trying to employ in the last couple of years is how do we get in front of students as soon as they get to campus? Like, how do we engage, first years on their first day of school and their first week? It's part of why we created this digital footprint tool called Orbit. So that we really can try to get in there, get on their screen, get in their ear as soon as possible. And so really making sure that you're doing, for us, the stuff that works is low barrier, really fun, sort of like silly types of events. Like I mentioned, we had a dog petting area last night. We've had petting zoos, just really making it as not only as low barrier to entry, but as fun as possible. And just trying to show them your personality. I mean, we're a fun, scrappy group of practitioners. We're not academics, myself and my colleagues. And I think, really thinking about like what your differentiator is for students is also a really great way to be thoughtful about how you can rethink sort of your value proposition for students. So, I think it's everything that we've been saying. I don't think it's anything sort of outside of the realm of what we've been discussing in terms of sort of marketing and making sure that, I think in particular, getting your student advocates there outside of your sort of core, if your core is a business school like us, it sounds like, and Brandon, perhaps, then really making sure that you're employing those tactics are really important. And for us, like our business school students love the other students, they're happy to mix and they're just as curious to figure out how to get across campus. So partnering with them on that too is a really successful strategy for us.
I love to address Jan's comment in the chat. I know, Diana, you can't see it, but she says, we're also more cost disparate at UNCG, and a large group of our participants are in the humanities and arts and science. Finding ways to reach them is difficult. A potential strategy you might try to implement is how do you contextualize what they're studying and how that intersects with entrepreneurship, right? The majority of social entrepreneurs come from a liberal arts background, not necessarily from business. Is that a potential speaker series? Can you, when you do a classroom shout out, can you frame it that way and just help students connect the dots about how this is applicable to what they're studying and their lives?
Thank you for sharing, Nina. Yeah, I can't see the chats, but I wanted to add what you just shared, Nina. I think it's really, for sure, a really important tactic. Another idea that I've seen is building relationships with professors and the opportunity to sit down and really have a conversation about the resources that you offer and how it correlates either to the major, to the program, to the courses, hopefully getting your program in somewhere in the syllabus, perhaps extra credit. That often can help as well to incentivize students to seek more, to learn more about your program. And, very importantly, integration in terms of thinking of your program. How will our programs live on to meet, the needs of students and evolve to meet the needs of 21st century jobs and what's going on around the world. I also found in terms of evolution of entrepreneurial programs and students that are walking into the LaunchPad is how personal it has become. Oftentimes they're looking to solve societal problems or problems that are important and personal to them. And as it has been said before, they don't always correlate that to entrepreneurship, although they already are entrepreneurs and have that entrepreneurial mindset. So having a space to create a culture of having that conversation and integrating your program into the fabric and the culture of your campus so students feel included and that it can be a cross collaboration experience for all.
I'm going to take one more question from the chat as it's coming in. How are metrics measured for students who attend events but do not stay engaged with the LaunchPad? This was a question from a conversation before, but maybe specific to the LaunchPad or not.
I'm not a LaunchPad program, so I can't speak to that, but I can tell you that how are those thought of? They're thought of really positively, right? Again, the expectation that every student on campus is going to come and spend all of their time at the Entrepreneurship Center is the wrong assumption. So just being happy about sort of the amount of people that you touch is really key. And then figuring out how do you cull that funnel, right? And just like startups do, and think about your conversion for each step of your funnel, right? Okay, if I on average, I have 10,000 students visiting my center and 3,000 or 2,000 even end up coming to an event. And then out of that, we see 600 in class that year. I mean, you'll sort of understand sort of the base and you can work to increase that. That's one way to measure it, or you can work to increase the diversity, right? It doesn't always have to be about quantity of touch points. Just I think for us, it's quality and then really understanding, what should we expect? And sometimes we have to go back and remind ourselves what the baseline sort of metrics of the campus are, right? Like how many students are in your school of engineering or your school of business and how many are female or male, right? And so sometimes we'll get really frustrated, but then when we look and sort of compare to the true sort of base of our student body, we put things a little bit more in perspective too. So I think understanding sort of where you're starting and what that existing base is for a university is a really important place to start before you start worrying about, my metrics aren't good enough, or I want to see more. Universities are different kinds of businesses. They're different kinds of places. So I think just understanding sort of the ecosystem, the ecosystem and environment you're operating in is also really an important piece of that exercise.
I think that metrics is something that every center is something always in the back of the mind, like first and foremost, like supporting students, but in the back of everything you're thinking of is still like, are we hitting those metrics? Are we getting the different groups that we want to make sure are represented? What would you guys say is what would you suggest centers do when they review those metrics and see that they aren't hitting that the par that they need to? After assessing, what would be the next step?
I think you go back and you interview your students, number one. I think you got to go talk to the people that you're supposed to be, driving impact for and figure out sort of what happened and being really approachable and curious in those conversations, right? About sort of their experience and have a bit of a retrospective. So I think, those qualitative touch points are really important, along with then going back if you have the data. I mean, this is something we just started a year ago. We're just starting to really get our data and understand quantitatively, okay, if we met this many students, in the first 2 weeks of school, and then we saw these many people at our programs in January, and then, didn't see the types of attendance we wanted to see in our spring semester, or whatever the program or whatever is, then we can hopefully start to go back and sort of understand where people fall off and then direct that qualitative research a little bit more specifically. But, I think the key for all of us is, universities are special and unique places. You got to be close to your students, and they're really going to be the ones to sort of, and they don't hold back, right? They're going to tell you the truth. That's the best part about sort of a university ecosystem. It's not hard to get feedback. You just have to be willing to ask for it and willing to really listen and listen hard.
And quickly, just it's related to this, but I think something we have noticed in the last year and a half, really with the start of COVID, is that student engagement has been really challenging. And so when you are constantly being asked to provide metrics, it feels like we aren't doing enough and we're failing. But it's also just taking a step back and being really aware of what's happening in the world and what may be happening in these students' lives. And because we're not directly on campus, so we like Blackstone, we're partnering with universities and supporting these different staff members in supporting their students, and also being mindful of what they're going through as educators and administrators. It's been a really challenging time. So just in terms of the support we're trying to offer throughout all of this, we are trying to carve out safer spaces and places where peers and staff can connect and kind of talk about some of these challenges, and addressing a lot of the mental health that's really come into play in the last year and a half, especially just given the challenges everyone's facing across the board, students on a personal level, more broadly just in higher ed. And so I think it's also taking into account with our metrics, we may not necessarily be meeting the numbers we want, but that doesn't mean we're still having such a positive impact on the students in the schools who are still, able to participate in the programs. But yeah, I think it's just having an understanding around that, because it has been a hard year. And, with the schools we've partnered with, that has been a constant theme. So it's just, how do we address that? So.
And if I can add on to that too, I think metrics around diversity, equity, inclusion can feel so broad and vague. And I think that it's always helpful to work from some type of framework. And so the most simple framework that I share with everyone when I talk about DEI is that diversity, equity, and inclusion are not three buckets on the same level. They're actually, it's more like a ladder, right? Where simply put, diversity is the presence of, doesn't mean people have decision-making power, but they're at least there. Right? Equity is the next step up, where it's like, okay, you have a seat at the table, whether that's decision power her to make decisions or financial equity, right? And then inclusion is psychological safety. Okay, you're sitting at the table. Do you feel comfortable to bring up some of these difficult topics, right? And so I think ways you can think about how does that translate to metrics is, okay, like, are there presence of, right? Are we allowing people to have power to affect the program, right? Are we able to give out grants, right? To get financial equity into the hands of students? Because, like Dayanna said, extracurriculars is a privilege, right? And then inclusion, are there ways we can collect feedback on how comfortable students feel, even qualitatively with interacting with us, right? And I think even the bigger picture or the bigger question to ask is, like, yes, we want to, like, why do you want to, increase diversity of participants in your program, right? And if, like, what is the goal behind that? Is it just like, and I think there's like a lot of good intentions, but like Carly said, if you're not self-aware and do an assessment on where you as a team stand on your understanding of these different issues and the systematic challenges that underlie that, then like that's a great starting place, right? And so tactically, how that manifests on our campus is with our staff members, we're very diligent about constantly educating ourselves. And I think most campuses have some sort of, we have the DDCE, Division of Diversity and Community Engagement, that has a lot of this content, Title IX office. We do bystander intervention workshops. We talk about neurodivergence and making sure that you're able to fold in these different lenses of diversity and inclusion is the first step if your mission is, access to entrepreneurship education for all.
Yeah, I've agreed with everything that has been said, and I would just add that it's important to keep in mind the human aspect of the work that we do, and as it has been shared, that all the challenges and competing priorities and the experiences that can take a toll on individuals. So really being understanding of that, and also really creating the space where your programs are reflective of and flexible of those situations and circumstances, and creating a space where you're hearing from students, because the numbers will never tell you the full story. Numbers will not give you the experiences that students have or what's on their minds. You know, I was just recently visiting a few campuses, and we heard from a student that passed by the student involvement fair, the Blackstone LaunchPad table about 3 times before he said, I think I actually am an entrepreneur. And he wanted help to kind of figure out, the idea that he had, but the way that, going into a space, like if we can all remember what going into a career fair looks like, is very overwhelming for a student. So if we can offer a space that really correlates to every stage of their experience in college, like sometimes they don't come back because they will, let's say, be focused on their senior year trying to land a job, or maybe a junior that's trying to land an internship. How can your, the entrepreneurial mindset help them achieve those goals? Perhaps they found that they're struggling in the classroom, maybe with writing or presenting. How can the programs, the entrepreneurial mindset tools offer and strengthen their experience in the classroom as well, and as they are navigating like their next steps? So kind of like understanding where they're coming from and adding value. And I love what you mentioned, Nina, about the economic hardships. There's a lot of people, students right now, even more in survival mode. And if they're not able to make ends meet, with the resources that are available, they might miss out on opportunities. So kind of identifying solutions like creating student stipends, or creating awards or participation stipends, for example, to really be understanding of those hardships.
Thank you all so much for your incredible insight into that. Right now, we're gonna technically jump into audience Q&A. So anyone in the audience, feel free to add any questions into the chat or into the Q&A box. And we can even bring you on stage to ask your questions live. The very first question we have is from Aaron, which is definitely related to what we've been discussing, but how are metrics presented or discussed and related goals set with university administrators?
So I can maybe try to tackle this one. I'm not sure how it is at other universities, but for example, the LaunchPad, we're housed under the School of Undergraduate Studies, which is this like pirate ship where you don't graduate with a UGS degree, but we help you undeclared students in their freshman, sophomore year find the right path. And so we say we're discipline agnostic, and it's all about interdisciplinary helping with student exploration. So whatever the broad goals of UGS are, we reflect on how we can manifest those goals of, getting students ready for a holistic, like work-life skills in the 21st century. What are some of those goals, and how does our work as an entrepreneurship center align with that? And I think paired with this metrics conversation, similar to what Dayanna said, it should always include qualitative stories. It just can't be numbers, right? So for example, we might say, hey, with our startup grant program, we were able to get $15,000 into the hands of 10 different students. But in addition to that, we have to say like, Oishika and her team are working on this health communication campaign for Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, and like here's a 60-second video of their testimony. And so something that we've been related to both like student recruitment as well as communication with stakeholders and leaders, administrators, is we're building in student testimonies into our program processes, right? And so for our startup grant, which is, we do give out $15,000 every semester, and that can be used for, a summer stipend to continue working in a research lab, or money that goes towards an unpaid or low-paying internship. We'll say, hey, submit a 60-second video of yourself talking about your goals for this summer. Cool. At the end, submit a 60-second reflection video on like what you learned, right? And so that is another tactic that's been really helpful on both the student recruitment side, as well as, keeping administrators invested in the vision and mission of your program.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, I think to directly answer the question, I try to stay away from that as much as possible. That's not a fun part of the job. And we've got some great some great help in that. But I just the one thing I really wanted to stress is just because you have the metrics, and I've been talking a lot about sort of a new metric system that we're using, does not mean that that's for any other eyes than our own internally. It's not something we want people to focus on. To Nina's point, we want them to focus on the qualitative stories, right? We want them to focus on the student impact, where our alumni are, sort of what's happened because of an entrepreneurial education throughout somebody's career and life. So I, again, try to stay away from that conversation with administrators as much as possible. But I think, making sure that it's not quantitative driven, I think that's really typically an approach that you can get yourself in trouble with. The qualitative approach is really key. And then, the last thing I'll add on that, we're a huge research university. We are not a research group. We are everything but research. So I think, with that awareness, we have to work even harder to sort of show our value and tell our stories as much as we have really great quantitative metrics. I think for us, we also have to be really aware of sort of our place in our university ecosystem. So I'd say if you're not producing entrepreneurship research, which we are not in our group in particular, but you're part of a research university, that's another sort of barrier that you have to get over, finding, with administrators and how to tell your story, because it's not a typical story in our university ecosystem, I'd say.
Thank you both. As of now, we don't have any other questions in the chat, but I'd like to take the last 5 minutes and hear, in the beginning of this discussion, we asked the audience what they're most interested in hearing about today. And overwhelmingly, the most chosen option was how to best support underrepresented groups. I'd love to hear if you have any final thoughts on your philosophy with that, the types of initiatives that your programs work on with that, and what would you like to conclude with? Kick it off.
Actually, just talking about getting feedback, I'd love to ask the audience a question. What was the most helpful thing that you got from this conversation? Because I think this is obviously helpful for us as well.
Brandon Reynolds says, to know that our plans for the future are in line with what you have proven to be successful. That students tell their stories if asked, from Lindsay.
Can I actually make just a comment about Lindsay's comment? Because and I know, with recruitment and seeing students want to see themselves reflected and represented, that's a motivator. I think for us, we really try. Our program was founded by a former U.S. president. We really try to lean into having that name recognition and that credibility, and how do we amplify students' stories, and we call our featuring and our onstage opportunities, and have students really have access to President Clinton. And in addition to sharing their stories, we want to open new doors by telling their stories. And so I think that's really critical, just in the impact that we're able to have is how we're leaning into, I think, what is at our disposal. And for us, much of that is sort of that name recognition. And I know all of us come from really reputable organizations and institutions. So I think definitely just lifting those student stories is really, really important, and has been something that students and alumni have told us has been really critical to their success, is getting that kind of stamp of approval, and also just having their stories be told through our platforms.
Yeah, I would add to what you shared, Megan. There's a saying that says it's not about us without us. So if a person can't see themselves in in the space or accessing an opportunity, they might never walk into your door or, feel the courage to apply to a program. So in lifting the stories of people with diversity in terms of walk of life, gender, race, religion, etc., being able to ensure that we're setting the stage to show the amazing experiences that other peers in the college and university have, and the alumni, how they're doing after being able to be part of the program. I think also being able to leverage alumni, they can see themselves like where they came from, what major they were in, the student groups they participated. They can relate to the challenges they perhaps experienced while on campus, because sometimes you may listen to another student or an alum before you listen to a staff of a program. So making sure that we keep that in mind, and again, personifying the experience of entrepreneurship and demystifying it and making it relevant to all students to make it accessible.
Thank you, Diana. I think that was a wonderful way to wrap up our discussion today. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to all of our panelists for being a part of this discussion. A recording of this will be sent to everyone who's registered for the event. And thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.